the fuel of which is going to be men and stone. In other words, you're the kindling. You ever start a fire outside in the woods somewhere, camping? Got to get those nice small sticks to get it going. You're the fuel to the fire. Unless, of course, you do the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires of us. And today we're going to talk about one of those aspects. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands you in the Quran. Again, when we hear a command in the Quran, this is not something you say, well, maybe we'll think about it. No, it is mandatory. Something that you have to do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Qu anfusakum ahdikum nara. You are to save yourselves and your family from the hellfire. First and foremost, you have to start out with yourselves. فَأَقَدَ شَيْءٍ لَا يُعْطِيهِ. That's the Arabs, they'll tell you that the person that doesn't have, you can't give you anything. I can't help you if I need help myself. And we all care and have concern about our families. But before we can do anything about our families, we have to do something about our own situation. A lot of us are concerned about our children, the youth, the next generation as we like to call it. But we can't have the blind leading the blind. So if we're so concerned about those children, our children, then we need to first be concerned about ourselves. If you've ever flown on a plane, which I would assume most of you have flown on a plane at some point in your life, you've heard that message in the beginning where the stewardess comes up and nobody pays attention because if the plane crashes or something like that. We assume we're all dead anyway. But she talks about how the oxygen mask comes down. You are to put it on yourself first, then onto your loved one. Because if you put it onto your loved one first, you're going to lose oxygen in the process. You're going to pass out. You will not help them, and you will not help yourselves, and both of you will have trouble. Possibly die. So therefore, a lot of times we concern ourselves with our children, and we neglect the most important thing, which is to take care of ourselves first. Why is that important? It's important for a lot of different reasons, brothers and sisters. Important for a lot of different reasons. I was given 30 seconds notice to give this khutbah, so you'll forgive me if I overstep my boundaries a few times, but I like to do that anyway. A lot of us, we assume, here's where I get in trouble. A lot of us, we assume that raising our children is somebody else's job. It's the Imam's job. Imam Z, he raised our kids, not me. It's the Imam's job to raise the kids. Well, that was before Abbas left, because Abbas, he was the youth director. It was his job to raise our kids. Or Imam Z's job to raise our kids. Or maybe it was ISI's job to raise our kids. The Islamic school, or maybe Tenzil Academy, it was their job to raise our kids. We put ourselves last. We assume I did my job. I put money in the donation box. That was all that was required of me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say for you to save yourself and then find somebody else to save your family. He tells you to save yourself and then for you to save your family to the best of your ability. Now you can try, and at the end of the day the results are up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because if Nuh alayhi salam can't save his son, who in the world are you? But that doesn't mean that you don't try. You, as we say, tie your camel to the tree. You gotta do something. You have to do something. And as we said before, the one who doesn't have can't give. Most of us were very concerned about our children and making sure that they get their secular education. Right? That's top notch. Number one, make sure we get that secular education. Because we want them to be doctors, engineers, and all of those other things. In fact, in most Muslim countries, and I have no shame saying it, the lowest of the degrees you can attain is what? Sharia. Let's be honest. I know that's the truth in the Arab world. I can't speak for the Indian subcontinent. But if you don't get the grades to go into the academic fields of science and engineering, and doctor's first choice, of course, then you are deemed, well, let's not use such harsh terms, but you can go over to the Islamic studies department. But the reality is, I don't care where you live, whether it's Andalus or one of these other places. I don't care how much money you have in the bank. I don't care how many cars you got, whether you got a Mercedes, whether you got a Lexus, whether you got a BMW. I don't care if it's a 6-bedroom house. None of that guarantees you or your children paradise. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. It's all about believing and doing righteous deeds. You can take that money to the grave. Nobody cares. No one. Especially not this guy up here. Rizq ala Allah. Right? That money can go with you to the grave. Look at the Pharaoh. Allah preserved him for us. He's sitting in some museum in the UK. What did all that gold do for him? Nothing. Your position, your title, and all of these things. And now we're passing those things on to the next generation, saying this is what is important. First and foremost, we want our children to be educated about this deen that we are professing to be very important to us. خَيْرُكُم مِّنْ عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَ. The best of you are the one who learns the Quran and teaches it. How many of you sitting in this room right now, you encourage your kids to read the Quran, to memorize the Quran, you send them to the school, and you aren't reading the Quran yourself? You're not memorizing it yourself. You've got no connection to it yourself. Well, I'm not saying it's nifaq in Islam, but in the English language, we call this hypocrisy. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَا تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Oh, you who believe. Allah's talking to you. Why is it that you say that which what you do not do? You're going to say one thing and do another? Oh, little Ahmed, you go read Quran. But you're not going to do it yourself? You are the first example for your children. You, number one, especially the mothers. How many of you encouraging your children to pray? You're not praying yourself. Cutting corners. You're skipping it here and there. Oh, I care about my children. I care dearly about my kids. Look, brothers and sisters, your children are gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are gifts that Allah has bestowed upon you. Many people can't have children. And you should say alhamdulillah for the fact that you've been given that opportunity in the first place. Many people can't have kids. Some people have their kids blown away from them right in front of their face. But you have children and they're growing up in a very peaceful environment. They are gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the gratitude that you show to Allah is not going to be shown in the way that you brag about them in front of your friends. Your gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to be shown by the amount of times you take pictures of their cute outfits or update your friends on Facebook about their daily progress. Your gratitude to Allah for your children is going to be shown in the way in which you raise them. That's gratitude. You might come and say, well, it's a little bit late for me, brother. I'm just, trying to put my child in the right environment. Brothers and sisters, I have a story. It's kind of difficult to tell sometimes because some people get upset. But, at the end of the day, when I was in Medina, I study all day. Read books, write my books. I work long, hard days. Wake up in the morning. I'd be off to the Jamia by about 7 o'clock in the morning. I would come to stay in my studies till about 12:30 in the afternoon. Not much of a break, class. I'd get in my car without air conditioning. I'd drive a half an hour to go teach a bunch of Saudi kids English until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, drive back in my un-air-conditioned car, exhausted, eat like a Marine, teach my kids for a little while, run to the haram, study until about 10:30 at night, come home, and do it all over again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. 7 days a week, no days off. But as I would come home, and some of you might have experienced this, I'd knock on the door, somebody would greet me, and my wife, every once in a while, would say, would you like the good news or the bad news? And if you're like me, I would just like to get to the good news, or rather the bad news first, because the good news, I'll be happy about it, I can deal with that later, but I want to know what's wrong. Bad news is that my son picked up one of the Qur'ans and he wrote in it. What type of kids you raising? You raising kids to write in the Quran, scribble all over the Quran? What type of kids you reading? No, my dear brothers and sisters, I'm not. But I can tell you that my children, just like your children, they want to be just like Dad. And so when my kids see me all day reading the Quran or opening up books and writing in them and putting highlight marks in them, they want to copy what Dad does. Just like your kids want to copy what you do. So especially when you're living in America, where it's walk the walk, don't just talk the talk, you can't tell your children, do as I say, not as I do. Because you are their very first teacher. Not the imam, not the youth director, not Tenzil Academy, not ISI. They are like salt on the meal. You're the main course. And that responsibility Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left up to you. وَقُولُوا قَوْلِي هَذَا اسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ لِي وَلَكُمْ. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Brothers and sisters, you got to ask yourselves, you want your children to read and memorize the Quran? Do you read and memorize the Quran? You want your children to pray, wa aqimu as-salat? Are you establishing the prayer? Not just in the masajid, but at your homes. Are you doing these things? You want your children to have good character. Well, there's a proverb that everybody knows in every single language in the world because it's true that the apple does not fall far from the tree. I can look in the mirror sometimes and just see the way my father would have moved or twitched, smiled. Your kids are going to be a lot like you. If you really care about how your children are going to come up to be, then the first person you should be worried about is yourselves. You want your children to have good character. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتِمَّ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. That verily I've been sent for the perfection of the character of the people. What type of person are you? My dear respected brothers, are you the type of brother that comes home from work and you knock on that door? Or you ring that doorbell and you hear the footsteps of your children running? Daddy, 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 Abby, 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 baba, 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 because they're excited to see you? Or you that type of brother that knocks on the door and everything goes quiet? Because everybody's afraid of the monster who's about to open that door. Which one are you? What type of kid do you want your kid to be? Are you the type of father that comes home and smacks up his wife? Well, chances are your son might be learning to do the same things. Are you the type of brother that smiles at people, that's generous, that has good character, that's thoughtful, that's kind, that's patient, that controls his anger and his emotions? What type of example are you setting for your children? Brothers and sisters, we can talk all day about the type of institutions we have to set up, about all of the different teachers that we can hire, the different imams we can bring in. We could get a youth imam, we could get a youth director, we could do all of these things to establish the establishment of these institutions for the betterment of our children. But if you do not establish the institution of your household upon good character and righteousness, you're wasting your time. You are wasting your time. We all have to take a deep look in the mirror at ourselves first and foremost. Brothers and sisters, we have to make sure that we put our children on a path to success, and first and foremost is of our own character. The way in which we deal with people, the way in which we deal with our spouses, the way in which we deal with our children. Your child makes a mistake. How do you interact? You freak out, start smashing things, yelling, screaming, hitting. Maybe about 6 months ago, I got called to go to some hospital where some father was watching his son die. You know what I said to him? Nothing. What do you say to that man who's watching his kid die right in front of him? No hope. He's going to die. Each day, more things lose. His vision, his hearing, his ability to breathe. He's just watching his kid die. God forbid that ever happens to any of you. Those children are gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A broken dish, a stain on the carpet, a tear in the rug or in the cloth. Is it really that big of a deal for you to flip out and start smacking around and abusing your kids physically? Is it really that big of a deal? Because I'll tell you what, you're not mad at the kids. You're not mad at your children at all. You're mad at you and your life situation, and you're frustrated and angry about how your life is going, and you're taking it out on your kids. And that's called cowardice. That's right. If you're beating up your kids because you're angry about your own life situation, I'm calling you a coward, and you can meet me outside after the football. Brothers and sisters, the way in which we interact with our children is going to have a much larger impact on them than the institutions or the imam or the teacher. It is our responsibility. We have to try to create environments as well for our children, like these institutions. We have to make sure that there are youth activities for our children to get involved in. And some of you might be looking at me like, hey, I ain't got kids. I'm too young for that. Or I don't have children at that age yet. Well, you better be worried more than anybody else. Because the reality is, if you've got kids 13, 14, 15 years old right now, and there are not youth groups established in the masjid to give them an outlet, then you've already lost. The reality is that those of you who have toddlers that are only 2 or 3 years old, you better establish those programs so that they actually exist when your children need them. Of course, that's a community effort. Allah calls us to encourage one another to collectively work towards that which is good and righteous. But some of us, we think, hey, it's not my problem. I'm too old for that. I don't have children anymore. Brothers and sisters, every community on every corner of the earth, they all say it takes a village to raise a child. Every single kid we see walking through here, we have to treat it like it's my child, and I'm concerned about that child. We have to make sure, first and foremost, that we try to protect our kids from all of the social ills that they have that are facing them right now. The type of stuff that your kids are dealing with now and today. And it's not just America. Don't kid yourselves. I've been overseas to many different countries. They're suffering the same problems. The internet is everywhere. The filth is everywhere. Don't kid yourself that, oh, it's only in America. But even if you want to think it's only in America, guess where you are? You're in America. So you have to realize and start thinking that your children are growing up with a lot more difficulties than you were ever exposed to. With regards to drugs, with regards to faith, with regards to sexuality. A lot of these things you didn't even have to think about as a child. You weren't exposed to people talking about different types of faiths. You weren't exposed to people talking about different types of moms and dads. You weren't exposed to any of these things. You didn't have widespread drug problems and drug cartels. These things are realities. So we have to put our children in environments where they feel safe and they have the ability to continue to practice their religion in a strong manner. Brothers and sisters, it's important for you that you pay attention as much as possible to your children's friends. The Prophet ﷺ said, "الرجل على دين خليله فلينظر أحدكم من يخلل." That the man is on the religion of his companions. You have to invest in your children's friends. When you see another child that you're like, you know what, that's a good kid. You know what, that kid's got good character. Invest, buy him out. You put a lot of money into a lot of things. Send your son and that kid on trips, buy them popcorn, pizza, whatever you can to win them over and to build a strong relationship and bond between those kids. Don't do what a lot of people do is say, hey, go play in a multi-purpose hall. Hey, go play out in the street. You're not living in that type of time where you can pull off that sort of stunt. You got to find what I refer to as Uncle Kid. A lot of you had situations in your lives, for the most part, that you wouldn't have felt comfortable going and speaking to your parents. Your children are much the same. So it's important that you find mentors, adults, people that are older, that your children feel comfortable speaking to. I refer to this person as Uncle Kid because when I was a kid, I had an uncle that he just seemed like he was a teenager for life. So we will interact with them. And you can find those brothers in the masajid. It's easy to recognize them. Who are the older people that seem to always connect with the kids? Create a stronger relationship between your children and those people. That way, if something's going wrong, you can always ask that person, my kid all right? Yeah, he's good, don't worry about it. Or no, actually there's a problem you need to address. But again, brothers and sisters, I'll close with what we started with, is that we have to go back to ourselves. You save yourself and your family from the hellfire. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ. Every single one of you is a shepherd. كُلُّكُمْ, all of you, man and woman. كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. That each and every single one of you is a shepherd, and each and every single one of you will be asked about your flock, about your family, about your children. And so it's important that you put yourself in a position to succeed. A lot of you, unfortunately, you have no relationship with your children. You don't even know them. And they don't even know you. One of the problems is because in today's digital age, a lot of us, what we're doing is our child comes over and says, Ebi, 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 Ummi, 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 Mama, Mama. Yeah, Oh, mashallah, let's go tell your dad. And you ain't even paying attention. You're watching Al Jazeera. Shh, quiet, quiet, quiet. You got something more important to do than to give your children time. The phone, the news, the cricket match, the soccer match, whatever else it is that you are occupying your mind with, that is a million times less important than your children. Oh, mashallah, yeah, go tell your father, go tell your father. You think your children don't recognize that you don't care? Are you the type of father that doesn't even know the interest of your own child? Look, I don't know what the kids are into these days, Pokemon, whatever the heck else it is, I don't know. My kids aren't that age yet. But if my kids were into those things, I would learn about those things. Not because I like it, but because I need to be able to connect with my child. If I've got a child that's in that basketball court every day and I don't know who LeBron James is, you've got a problem. You need to be able to connect with your kids. And that takes for you to make some effort in researching about the society that you live in, specifically the things that your child is interested in. And when that child, no matter how young or no matter how insignificant the thing that they're pulling at your shirt for, you need to listen. Get down on your knees and make eye contact with your child. So that that child, when he is speaking or she is speaking, she feels like or he feels like they are the most important person in the world to you at that moment. Because if you don't, that child is going to grow. And when that child grows, they're going to start getting into things. And those things that they get into, you'd really like to be able to save them from. You'd really like to be able to have some influence over your child in the decisions that they make. Brothers and sisters, it reminds me of Abasa wa Tawalla and Ja'ahu al-A'ma. The Prophet ﷺ, he turned and he frowned when the blind Sahabi came seeking more guidance from him, because he was doing what he thought was important at the time and speaking to the important people. We might liken that to ourselves. We're watching the news. We're catching up on things. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّى. And you don't know. It might be that they're guided. Brothers and sisters, if you don't listen to your children in those small things when they're little, they're never going to come to you with those big things when they get older. And you'll be one of those people coming to the Imam saying, I don't know what happened. I did all the right things. I put him in Tanzil, I put him in ISI. You did all the periphery things, but you forgot the number one thing, which was yourself, your character, and the way in which you interact with those children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our kids, protect our families, protect our communities. اللهم اغفر لنا واعف عنا وارحمنا انت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. واخر دعوانا ان الحمد لله رب العالمين واقيموا الصلاه.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا واعتدلوا وتراصوا واستقيموا يرحمكم الله. Straighten your lines, fill in the gap, shoulder to shoulder, heel to heel. Fill up the line in front of you before you start a second or a third. Please turn your cell phones off or on silent. استووا واعتدلوا وتراصوا واستقيموا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brothers and sisters, please don't forget to donate as much as you can to the masjid. There's no further announcement.